r/AskReddit. What is some scary shit you've experienced? Let's take a deep dark dive to some redditors' scary real-life experiences. Story 1. I was about to go on an elevator, and when the door opened, there was a technician working inside. I stopped and turned around to walk down the stairs, but the technician told me he was finishing up and that it was okay to use the elevator. When I got on and pressed first, the elevator dropped like an inch before the door even closing. I stood there frozen, looking at the technician to reassure me. He just casually said, "That's not supposed to happen," and slipped out as the door closed, leaving me behind. The elevator worked fine, but that shit was not cool. It was bad enough that the technician said that wasn't supposed to happen, but he went out and ditched OP, who is now in a state of dread to what will happen next. The technician really did a good job traumatizing OP. I don't know why the technician didn't say anything after that, or told OP to step out of the elevator, because something did went wrong, but I guess it ended fine and no one was hurt, except for a certain someone having a fear of the elevators now. Story 2. This was from when I was about 4 or 5. I have a very vivid memory of many things from when I was little, and my father has recalled his side of this story, verifying this experience for me. When I was little, my bed faced the door. I was the bottom of a bunk bed. My sister would sleep on top. I would always pretend to be asleep as a kid. I enjoyed people picking me up and taking me places while I was sleeping. I don't know why I did this. There were at times when I would fall asleep on the stairs and get in trouble from almost tripping my mom. On this particular night, I recall hearing somebody come into my room. I was little, so I don't recall thinking anything other than, I'm going to pretend I'm sleeping, as I did often anyway. Although something in me felt more pressure than usual to pretend I was sleeping. It was less of a fun thing, and it felt more like a survival thing. I wasn't that scared. I was just very determined to make sure this person thought I was sleeping. At first I assumed it was my dad. For some reason I knew it was a guy, but I can't remember why I knew it was a guy. The man picked me up from the bed, and since I got carried often from my father, I knew exactly what it felt like to be carried by him. It was not my father. I remember this person taking me from my bed and walking down my stairs. While partially down the stairs, the man whispered, "Are you awake?" At this point, I was completely devoted to making sure he thought I was asleep. I remember him walking into my parents' bedroom, the door creaking open, being placed in the center between my mother and father, who were sleeping. I could feel my father on my left and my mother on my right. I remember knowing the man didn't close the door till a little while after. I could kind of feel him staring at me, although I wasn't sure. I pretended I was asleep until I actually fell asleep and awoke to my mother berating me. My parents had gotten mad at me many times while they were transitioning me into the no sleeping in their bed phase. I'd begged many times since I liked sleeping in their bed. And I told my mom I got carried down. I got grounded because my parents didn't believe me. I remember my father acting all annoyed while he was getting ready for work, and my mother telling me to get up and go to my bedroom and get ready for the day. I was very upset and confused because in my head my father had to be the one to bring me down. And I continued for the rest of the day to try to convince my mom that I hadn't gone down there myself. Flash forward 2 years later, and I mentioned the story to my father. I asked him who was staying with us during that time, and he said nobody. You remembered that story specifically for some reason as well, with how odd it was. He said he didn't really understand why you were so persistent on someone carrying you down when there was nobody who would have done that. And I wasn't that stupid of a kid, at least. I'd mentioned my story, and he kind of chuckled and didn't believe me and said I probably just imagined it, although he does remember the incident. You know, it's a strange story since there was no one staying with us at that time. And who would break into somebody's house just to move one kid to a different bedroom? But I remember it so vividly, and even my father remembers. It could have just been OP's parents messing with them, but that doesn't explain why their parents got angry. You can't help but wonder who that person is, and what is he doing in their house, and why did he just transport a kid into their parents' bedroom? Story 3. I was sexually assaulted at a party, on the garage floor, while about 12 other people, including someone I thought was my best friend, watched. I kept asking her to help me. She looked terrified, but not once did any of the 5 other girls, we were 16, say anything. I woke up, came to thrown under their kitchen table and listened to them all call me a slut. I had been virgin. I walked home, went to bed, and never told anyone for 5 years because I was so ashamed. I thought it was my fault for getting drunk, and it was simply a fucked up cautionary tale. It wasn't until I finally told some that I saw it for what it was: rape. Therapy has helped heal me. I'm in a good place now, but it still makes me really sad that not one person spoke up. This is yet another tale of how dumb teenagers are. I'm not talking about OP here, but the parties teens throw or just get together has some, if not, has always have incidents like this occur. It's the social pressure to quote-unquote have fun, despite doing ridiculous acts or in some cases outright crimes. I can't even imagine how OP felt during that horrible time. Not to mention the dread they felt when none of the other people, especially her so-called best friend, dared to help them despite asking for help. I'm glad OP has turned to therapy and is now in a better place. I just wish no one would have to go through something like that. Story 4. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, my family was on a road trip and stopped to get gas. My mom and I went inside the gas station convenience store while my dad refilled the car. My mom started chatting with a worker, so I wandered off to go look at the snacks and candy. I noticed this man who had his phone raised to his ear and was just walking slowly through aisles. I just assumed he was trying to call someone and focused my attention on all the junk food. Shortly after, my dad came inside and was heading toward me, but as he was approaching, he was able to see the creepy man's phone screen. He was pretending to be on a phone call, but he was secretly videotaping me. My dad immediately yelled to the workers to call 911 and began to chase him. My dad and a worker chased him through the store, but he escaped through the back door, got into a white van that was left running, and sped off. We weren't locals, so we never found out if the police caught him or not. Well, fast forward to when I'm in college. My dad calls me up to tell me a murderer had been caught in the area we had been visiting back then. The man had kidnapped 2 young girls, brought them to the woods, assaulted them, and dismembered their bodies. He was caught because one of the girls had posted a selfie right before she went missing, and he was in the background. Then my dad sent me the pictures and said, "That was the man I caught filming you. I will never forget his face." I'm glad this story ended in the murderer behind bars. I'm sure the family of the victims finally has closure to their griefs. As for OP, I'm so glad their father acted in such a quick manner to protect his family. Kudos to their dad for his immediate actions to fend off the predator. Story 5. I work in the woods for a living here in the western US, lately as a fire lookout in a remote location. I'm talking a 3-mile hike to a mostly abandoned dirt road, and another hour drive before you even hit pavement. This was last summer. It was around 11 p.m. on a moonless night. Pitch black outside and the lights of the town 30 miles away have mostly dimmed. It was a relatively calm night, very little wind. The tower sits atop a more or less bald spot, atop a lower peak in the middle of a burn scar. There's not much within the immediate area besides some long grass and a smattering of younger fir trees. This is what it looks like looking roughly south during the day. And this is what it looks like roughly at night, looking more eastward. Here's a view from the catwalk toward the tower in a long exposure because it's pretty. At around 11 p.m., I'm sitting there under the glow of a propane light out on the porch, finishing a book. I suddenly heard a rustling coming from down the hill to south, about 20 degrees to the right from the photo I showed there, where there's less to see. It was just barely audible and sounded like it was approximately 300 feet away. It was very sudden and sent a shiver up my spine. I went back inside and grabbed my flashlight to have a look around from the catwalk. Nothing at all out there in that direction that I could immediately detect. And then I saw it. Well, saw something. To this day, I'm still not certain what it was, but what I do know is that it wasn't a trick of the light or of my eyes. I looked at that exact spot the next few nights and never saw it again. I know my home like the back of my hand. Every tree, every shrub. Out in the distance, next to a lone boundary tree, was a vague shape, dark and ill-defined despite the surrounding area being relatively in focus. Looked to be about 4 or 5 feet tall, roundish, definitely wider than the tree, roughly human-shaped but not quite right. like it was some memory of what a human looks like from someone who hasn't seen another in a long time. Hunched. I watched it for what felt like forever. It didn't move, not initially. After a bit, it shifted slowly to my right, behind the tree. And then it was gone. And I never saw it again. I would have been able to see it behind the skinny tree and if it went down the hill or side hill. Like I said, this relatively small snag was on its own, on a relatively gentle downslope. Now this is an area with a lot of animals, mostly white-tailed deer and wild cows. We have some black bears, some elk, some cougars, and some wolves, but they don't tend to let themselves be seen, and they tend to skitter off when they learn they're being observed. I've seen the predators before, but never that close to my tower. The whitetails and elk come up, but there's little in terms of food and people are known to come here. We also have visitors and hunters, but my location in particular is only really known to locals and doesn't exist on public maps. The official start of the extremely overgrown, hard to follow, and obviously abandoned trail is about 2 miles after a locked and unmarked gate. Hunters don't tend to come up because the animals don't tend to come close. Poachers wouldn't because they're aware we report to law enforcement. It still freaks me out a little to this day. I hope it was just a person or an animal in some weird circumstance. I don't feel too comfortable sitting outside after dark anymore. This is a lot to take in. It's creepy enough being alone in a watchtower in the middle of the woods where all you can see around you is pitch black darkness. I would assume OP is at that watchtower alone. OP did not mention any co-workers with them. Only the brief mention of hunters, poachers, and visitors are known to be there, but rarely do they even visit. Some might speculate Bigfoot, as it's the only creature that is widely known to live in the woods, which we all know is a myth. If not the Sasquatch, then what did OP see in the distance? I surely would not hope it to be a person like OP said. Imagine seeing the dark silhouette of a person behind a tree, not moving and just staring at you in the middle of the night. That will just keep you up at night and give you nightmares. This concludes the second video to the Unhinged Stories YouTube channel. I'll be doing my best producing more videos like this and other more topics that are interesting. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button to not miss any of my uploads. I hope you enjoyed listening to these scary stories. Leave your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to know what you all think. And be sure to let me know you enjoyed watching by hitting the like button. Every video takes a while to make. So please give me some love and show your support by subscribing, leaving a comment, and liking the video. I would appreciate even the minimum of support. This has been Unhinged. Thank you for watching.